Georgia, on July 9th, 2003. I have the honor of speaking with Robert Lyon Porter, who served in the U.S. Army from April 13th, 1943 to December 20th, 1945. Robert, why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about your early years, where you were born, and when you were born?
Well, as you said, I'm Robert Porter, 80 years old, plus about 5 months. My uniform is not near as old. It's about 59 years old. Supposed to be laughed there. I'm a native of Atlanta, Georgia, because there's 3 or 4 Atlantas people are sometimes not aware of. Second birth out of Emory University, if that means anything. Brought up in Boys High School, and whenever I say that, they say, "Yay, Boys High!" Not too many places that just put a B on there. That they are such a vaunted school that they think of that they just put B, and you're supposed to know that it's Boys High. So I guess I've always been somewhat patriotic. They aligned with background in the Scouts and Drum and Bugle Corps and in Bass High in Atlanta, and taking ROTC in Boys High. And I decided that I should volunteer, not to wait to be conscripted. I felt that strongly. I had a brother that joined the Navy just shortly after Pearl Harbor, and I was in school at that time. So when I got out after working for about a year or so, then I resigned and went right into the enlistment at Fort McPherson. And Fort McPherson was named, by the way, for General Fort McPherson, who was killed in the Valley of Atlanta, the Union Army. And first thing I got duty out there was to about peeling spuds, and that day was 13th of April, and the only claim to fame there is the fact that that was Thomas Jefferson's birthday also, so I always remember that. I knew that things were going to be tough in the military, at least I thought so, and I talked to the people around the home where I lived off of St. Charles Avenue in Atlanta, northeast Atlanta, and I lost my father when I was 10 years old, so my mother was the one that was kind of watching over me those years, and they would say, "Well, be a good boy now. You know how they do this. Always good boy, and do you know what's right, what's wrong." And to me that was important. Some of the neighbors in those days, you knew them around you, and so I called on them and I said, "Well, I appreciate your prayers. I know there's going to be some things that are temptations that I'll have to turn away from, and I think I have a good background. And if I can't turn away from those, I'd rather come back in a box." I said that. So we went on to get shipped out after taking some tests and deciding where we were going to be lined up. And I was to be in the Signal Corps, I knew that, and to Camp Crowder. So we had a long train ride with packed cars.
Robert, can I stop you for a second? Fort McPherson, was that where basic training was?
No, Camp Crowder, that's yet to come. I was just a few days out at Fort McPherson, enough to do the paperwork and decide and give you a test and so on and see whether you're smart enough to stay in the Army or whatever. So we had a day's ride almost in those days going out to Camp Crowder, Missouri. And I remember the very next day that when we started to call out names, "All right, you guys fall in." I'm calling off the names: Johnson, Porter, Jernigan. And I thought, now there's a guy I know from Atlanta from this same high school. And I thought, well, at least it's somebody I know. And we got together there for a day or two and went into one of the nearby towns the weekend. And after that, I made contact with a little town called Carthage, Missouri. And USO there was very active. And I went on the weekends, so I have a pass there. And met a lady that was, last name was Ward. And she was a lady that they called Mom Ward. So she right away came to me like a mother. She was that sort of person. So I'm making quite a point out of this. She represented the best in our country. She was volunteering. She was for service every weekend and doing various things. And at that time I was given one of these little booklets that's put out that I carried all the way through, the Spiritual Almanac for Servicemen. And it had scriptures in there. It had some of the songs we sang and a number of things, and I carried that with me. And I'm going to read one little part here that I've memorized enough, but a part that it meant a lot to me as things went on. It's by James Russell Lowell, and among other things, it said, "Truth forever on the scaffold." and wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, and keeping watch over his own. And those simple words were important to me, as you'll find out as we go along. Well, I left there after a while. I was due to go to the South Pacific area, a team of us, about 10 of us, and they found that I didn't have glasses to put in my gas mask. And I never thought that was important, but they said it was. So I was upset, unlike that fellow we saw a while ago that was upset because he couldn't go the other way. And I wanted to go out Pacific. Well, I've learned since that those fellows were not heard from. I mean, they, that most of them were lost. So I don't regret that at this time. Well, later on we did ship out. We went to Hampton Roads, Virginia. That's a historic area in our country. But I had a couple of days off before we loaded up and went out. I made a point to go to historic Williamsburg in Richmond, Virginia, the White House of the Confederacy, which you can tell I'm a Southerner, and William and Mary College. And I wanted to see all I could, not knowing what the future would bring, whether we would come back, whether I'd come back. But this is part of America, and I thought that was important. Well, a few days later then, we were ready to go, and we were told we were. And we got on the trains, and they backed up to the unloading, the debarkation area in Hampton Roads. And as we were sitting there waiting for that to take place, sitting in the cars, passenger cars, I noticed an MP walking past our window outside, and he came around a time or two. And you know what? He was carrying a machine gun pistol, a Tommy gun, I guess we would say in those days. And I thought, what's going on around here? And then it dawned on me, it should have dawned on me earlier, hey, he's wanting us to go this one direction. We can't get off this thing. And we laughed about this a little bit. This is getting serious. We are going to get off this, this train and get on that ship. And that's to keep us, anybody had to change their heart. So that didn't bother me, but it did make me think this is getting down to the real nitty gritty now. So we loaded onto a ship. I don't know the name of it. It was, what they tell us was a British ship. It was well known in history for some books and stories written about it.
Robert, how long had you been in the Army at that point?
Probably 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
When
So you had already gone through your basic training.
Yes.
And and what unit were you in at that point?
Well, these were what we call replacement depot replacements, and it meant that as the war went on, of course it had already started, been in North Africa and even into Italy and so forth, that when there's enough losses, well, then you replace them. So we were not assigned at all. I just had my training. I knew what it was, working in signal corps, setting up telephone equipment, central office type thing, and several other things. They just added on some more things since I was going to be there for a while. It must have taken 3 months to get the the replacement for my eyeglasses for the gas mask. So that's the background. We were out just a day or two zigzagging because we were still concerned with submarines, and we got an alert there one day that we thought maybe there was going to be a submarine attack. And this must have been on a Sunday because I remember we were on the top side and we were singing, and I thought, well, good time to sing "Nearer My God to Thee." All we could do was just to sing this because, anyhow, a few days later though, it was still, it's 11 days taken to get across to where we were going, where that was. And they put me on some gun emplacements up high so we could defend ourselves a little bit, and I thought that was pretty good. Maybe they have some action yet. Well, another several days, and I could tell we were slowing down. Now it was below in the hold of the ship. We had a lot of tea, by the way, TEA that is, and I enjoyed that, but not quite that much. But that was the background of the British, the English, I say, old chap. And so we pulled up somewhere, and all I could see was barrage balloons. What is this, and where are we? Didn't look like anything that I recognized, and that's understandable. Turned out to be North Africa, and they had those balloons up there. The other troops had been there before us, some months before, and had cleared that out and had moved on forward into Italy and so on. So that wasn't the question. But the next thing I observed was, those of you that will know from history, by this time you see this, said Gilroy was here. And there was that design of a man's head and his eyes just above the wall, saying Gilroy. In other words, you're late, we're already here. And the next thing I saw, Delano will love this, it said drink Coca-Cola. Well, that means that Coca-Cola was on the job way back there, and had the name out there, big lights. So we actually went into our area next to our end, Mir Kabir. That Mir is French, and that Kabir is Arabic, I learned later. And as we went in, we passed some ships. One of them, at least, was still on its side. It had been damaged heavily. Would you believe by whom? The British. It's quite a conflict almost between the British and Navy and the French when they weren't willing to give up and come over on our side. So they had some battles there, and we had the British had to had to sink a couple of their ships to keep them going over to Germany. That was the problem there. Well, we loaded up. By this time it was in the evening to 2.5 these trucks, and I started driving through these little towns, and I remember hearing sounds like and a minarets type of thing. And of course now these people were Arabic, and you could imagine that. And there's some camels around too. I don't mind looking at camels, but the smell of the camels and the sound of those minarets as we drove on through and out to the middle of nowhere. We was probably 8 or 10 miles back from that way we started out, and unloaded by that time, maybe 8 o'clock, so at 9 o'clock. And it was a beautiful scene in the daytime. It was a drop off of 150 feet or more along those cliffs. This is Algeria, French Algeria at that time. And so we were told that we had some things to watch out for. The Arabs sometimes would attack some of our guys, and under cover of darkness, and they used knives, and that's what they're good at. They're very stealthy, so that got us thinking about that. Well, in a day or two, we all got guard duty, and so I received that too. That is to take it for 2 hours on and 4 hours off, and so on. And so the first time in my life I've even heard of walking double guard duty. That is, one guy next to me and right next to one another. And I thought about that. I like this idea. And we had bayonets mounted on those M1s because it was possible that they would attack you from time to time. If you were well armed and 2 of them, it was less likely. So we carried that out. And so we didn't have any trouble there, but we pulled guard duty. Later on, about that time, several days later, they want to keep us in good shape physically, like I'm supposed to be now or something, I don't know. But they want us to run and jog and so forth. So my memory, best I can remember, we probably walked out a mile, walked a mile, ran a mile, walked another, and went out probably 2 miles and came back 2 miles. These are some back roads in the pretty desert area of North Africa. And if you're not a smoker, you get some smart aleck remarks once in a while from guys, and already it's like, you don't smoke? I mean, oh, black, you're hot, and all this sort of thing. After a while, you get sort of tired of hearing that. Well, it paid off, because on the way back, believe it or not, 5 or 6 or more, I'm not sure how many, of these guys who were steady smokers, they were in an ambulance. Now, that is because they're about to die, but they couldn't carry 4 miles back. So I said, that does that. I'm going to keep on walking, keep on running. And I didn't have more trouble with those fellas looking at me like, well, who's this guy, Well, things were not that exciting for a while. They were just taking the time to do those simple things. Another one little funny thing maybe, as we jogged along and walked, we passed some guys who were working with a shovel and so forth, picks on the roads, and they turned out to be Italians, and they were POWs. And we got saying to one another, those guys, they've got it better than we have. We're out here sweating and carrying a rifle, and they're over there, and they would look at us and just wave and smile. And I said, no wonder. They know where they're going to be tonight. No one's going to attack them.
These
they
were
got food.
German POWs?
No, I said Italian.
Italians.
They picked them up there and brought them back, And I said, we're on the wrong side. I was joking, of course, So we saw that. But when I got back there one evening, I thought, we ought to have a little more excitement around here. And I hope nobody will come out after me about this. But anyhow, I thought there ought to be something. We've talked about all these stories about somebody attacking. So anyhow, some of the guys were sitting around on the cots. There's a double-decker, and a fellow that I knew somewhat, he was sitting there, and they were talking, so I just eased my way out, and while they were still talking, I could hear them. This is a pyramidal tent. It's square. It takes about 8 or maybe 10 men, 10 or 12 in it, and so all of a sudden, while he was thinking about some of these things that we referred to, something touched his neck, and it was metal. It was steel, and he jumped up and started out running. Well, Porter had, that's me, in case you forget, had put a bayonet very carefully just to touch the side under the tent, you know. And he must have thought it was an Arab. These guys say Arab, they don't know about to say Arab, but anyhow. And he started chasing me even after he knew who I was. And that's where I learned to run. That's the answer. That's the joke, but not a total joke either. Well, that was that. And later on, we shipped on to Italy, and out of Canciano's farm. The first time I had a shower in 4 or 5 months, I guess it was a big bag of water that only would last about 3 minutes time. So you had to take a shower in a hurry, and that was the end of that.
The Americans had already landed at Anzio when you got. So
yeah.
This was afterwards.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so we already had taken much of Italy.
Yes, that's right. And they were drawing troops out of that to go into France. That's kind of what it meant to. But we still were not assigned at that point. We were getting ready. We knew that it was coming up, the invasion of France. They put together some troops that had been through all this, and not just new guys like us. So we trying to think what comes next. Key point here. We were listening to radio, shortwave, in a building there in Naples, Napoli it's called. Beautiful area, really. Was. And listening to some of that music by Glenn Miller, and so all you fellows that hear this, you might not know who they are, but that's the favorite music at that time in the 40s. And right in the middle of some good music, an orchestra there from Berlin, suddenly just went dead. I thought, now what's going on here? What's happening? That thing is still plugged in, it's working. And he said, "You boys of the 36th Infantry Division, we know that you're coming into France. We know when you're coming, we know where you're coming. You shouldn't do this. We'll be waiting for you." Those almost exact words. Now, what? And the word went around real fast. This doesn't make much sense, even to a peon like myself at that time, you know. So we found out later, and not many people might know this, but General Eisenhower, thank goodness, he did know about that too. He heard about it, that they had somehow leaked the information to somebody, spies or whatnot. So he moved up what would have been the invasion of southern France from about August 18th to the 15th because of that. Well, we're getting ready for that invasion. It's still a few days off. We didn't know that. I was still off an hour or two at a time. You could, as long as you came back and everything, it was all right. And so I went down to the where the naval units would be. And as far as I could see, this was at dusk. There's a castle, that Castle d'Oro, that protrudes out into the Bay of Naples. It's a beautiful place. People around the world would go there, wealthy people, and it's a beautiful setting normally. And as far as I could see, there were planes, well, beg your pardon, they came later. These naval ships, ours in particular, probably a couple of battleships, several cruisers, and a number of destroyers, some from Canada, some from France, some from Great Britain, of course, and even maybe a few from Italy. And all told, they tell me, reading about this later, there was just about as many as 1,000 ships to go in there. 77,000 men went in, including some paratroopers and so on. And so we tried to get in touch with my brother. I knew he was out there. I was told that he was on a battleship at that time. I don't know what he was on in, but didn't get word through to him, but we tried. So we went on in for the invasion near Saint-Tropez. This is not, it's kind of near Marseille, but Saint-Tropez, beautiful area it was. And they had been hit with heavy artillery at that time before we got there. I actually went on the next day with the units, with headquarters units, because we went in there to battle. We had to go in where the division commanders were, generals, colonels, and all this, and they weren't going or didn't need that. So we would go in as soon as they cleared enough area, we could set up a CP post there, and I would begin working there with the telephones, equipment, and all that.
Do you remember the date of this when you landed?
Oh yeah, August 15th.
August 15th, 1944. So it's 2 months after D-Day.
Yes.
So it's another front they're opening up on the south of France.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
And the French were preparing for this. I found out, of course, later, we didn't know then, but some of the FFE, the forces underground, they were expecting that we'd come in there. I guess they knew the actual date. But as I said, I went in later. We went up the Rue Napoleon, a key highway, kind of like one of our interstates would be, and we stopped off one night there. As yet, I was still not in a fixed unit. I was with the Corps. It was called 6th Corps. 7th Army, 6th Corps, and later on became a division. So I was going down, getting near the front, each statement here. And that night, sleeping in our cots, just temporarily bivouac overnight, I heard a sound, it was 11 o'clock at night maybe or something, and I put my hand over the side of the cot, and it went into water. I thought, what's going on here? And it dawned on me the water was moving up kind of fast, 8 or 10 inches a foot maybe already. And so we had to get out of there in a hurry. It washed away some of our things. This was in the southern part of France, as best I remember. Well, we came through that, of course, because I'm still here, and went on up further, and went into Germany. Finally, I was assigned into the 36th Infantry Division, 36th Signal.
I'm going to back you up a little bit. You're in Italy. How long? You were in a headquarters company.
France.
I'm sorry,
France.
Excuse me, in France, in a headquarters company.
Mm-hmm.
You were the signals.
I worked with the telephones and several kinds of communication. Most of that because I'd started out even when I was working after finishing high school here in Atlanta, and I worked in the telephone buildings here in Atlanta for about a year.
Who were you communicating with mostly at that point?
Well, one another. The units were beginning to fan out.
So these were the combat units.
Yes.
So you were getting reports back from the combat units.
Well, I would see that the telephone communications were working. If they needed to be adjusted or lines got cut, we had to do several things. I mean, my helping to set those up, sometimes operating on the switchboard myself, sometimes going out and say, Porter, we are missing some lines. This is not working. We've got to get it because it's down to the colonel with the regiment over here, and he's not getting through it, and that becomes critical. So you have to go at that time. So that took place. Our unit captured some top people, and I'll show you if I can turn to the right one, 36th Infantry Division. People that were tops in the German military. There's some of the units going in as far as that part goes, into France, and there'll be another couple of places here.
Hold it up a little bit more.
Yeah. And the prize catch, Goring, you see he is most unhappy. He put on a lot of weight, and I think that's all he knew to do after a while. He knew he was losing the war, but you can see Hermann Goring, he's number 2 man. And we captured von Rundstedt also, and I'll sneak this in here now, we can show it later if you'd like to, but you can pick up on this a little bit. You'll see some of the people that were captured. Our division did do that. Of course, that's toward the end of the war. And that took us into Austria. We were rushing through in April of '44. And there's some top ones here from France, Dallier and several others. Some people like Hollywood of Austria. They had left France and were trying to hide away down there. So some of the top people, von Rundstedt was another one. He was a Prussian general, considered to be one of the best. But I think this picture here demonstrates, of course, this guy was not highly thought of in a way by anybody, but nevertheless he was there. And these were some others, von Rundstedt and so on, getting out of his limousine there just after he surrendered. So that's the time I was with the 36th Infantry Division, and we got into. Well, I'm allowed to sneeze, I guess, this time.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, me. So let me jump to a little bit different area entirely, that is, a different area.
Well, all right. How long were you in France?
I figured out, I guess.
About?
I guess about 3 months, offhand.
Okay.
And
you moved up behind the combat troops.
That's right, yes. And see, then we were in the Army of Occupation there for another 5 or 6 months. I haven't really figured out what exactly, but we had to stay there because just kind of like it is today, they had to be troops there to keep the peace. Because
But when you went into Germany, the war was still going on.
oh yes.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we went through the Siegfried line, some heavy gun emplacements there, and our fellows, we had artillery 155 millimeters, called one of the large ones, long ones. Wow, I'm sneezing. I don't sneeze till I get in this again, I guess. But one of the unusual things, I guess, when we started out, part of the time being in a Jeep and tracing down where the lines were broken, sometimes German tank would go over it and cut it. Sometimes they'd cut it on purpose. Well, either way, that became very urgent right away. So we had to go. Whether it was at midnight, 4 o'clock in the morning, or whenever, we took off in a Jeep. Well, when it was at night, this got a little scary. You could not turn any lights on in a Jeep, and we had a good driver. That's all he did. Thank goodness that he knew how to get around. But a little light would show about 6 feet out in front of the Jeep. And when you're going 40 miles an hour, that doesn't sound very fast here today. Or 50 miles an hour, that's about tops. But he had to know where he was going, and and I found out too, this thing in front of the Jeep, it stands up a steel rod like that. It's got a little nick right up here like this. And I said, what's that for? I was dumb about some of these things before this. Well, Germans got smart. They put steel wires across the roads where we know we're going to come up, and some guys all but got decapitated from that. So I'm glad they caught on to that before I got here. You know, always started joking, but they'd put up this tall, triangular piece of steel. It was pretty heavy, and it had a hook. You see, it was cut out like that. So this was razor sharp, and it was usually cut that thing. So that made it a little more interesting, a little more exciting. Excuse me. But we had fellows that knew what they were doing. They had, I'll get some of that. Thank you. Thank you much. A little water. Another thing that was unusual that I had not heard of before at night, I fell as one of the regiments. I worked with the 141st Regiment part of the time down to the regiment, going from headquarters down to the regiment, working with them, and 3 regiments, of course, in the division. And one night they decided to do something a little bit different. They had a big searchlights that you normally would use to spot planes coming over, but they put them down on the ground and shone them right into where the German lines were, and that really confused them. They were told it worked out pretty well, and they would turn it back and forth like this, and our troops could move forward. Of course, I wasn't one of those. I was behind that, but we were watching it, seeing how it was working out. So that was interesting. I had not seen that done before. We went in through the heavy emplacements they had, the dragon's teeth, as they called it. Some of the guys dynamited that, some of those concrete pieces out, the teeth, that's where they get the name from. And it went on through, and by the time we went into Munich, for example, München, that was about the toward the end of April of '44, and the Germans were retreating pretty much at that time. I think they saw what was going on. They were more concerned with what was going on in Russia, I think. So we pursued them on down, going south into Austria, known as Österreich, and I thought that's one of the most beautiful areas that I have seen. Well, that next day, actually it would have been first part of May when we went in there. On May the 8th, as far as I could see, German troops had surrendered. That was the day. Thousands of them, and machine guns were mounted on tanks to guard them. A little incident, which is important to me. I was in my Jeep, and the driver, and we came to a crossroads, just small roads, but a lot of traffic was going. This is the end of the war, you see, really, and a lot of excitement on both sides. Ours was joyous, and theirs was not anything but that. As far as I could see, these were troops that gave up. We totally captured 30,000 during World War II. The 36th Infantry Division did. So at this point, we saw a Jeep, similar to a Jeep, but a little fancier wagon than that. Germany, a couple of their troops in there, but a Oberleutnant, dressed up real nice. The uniforms were good looking, and he was a proud Oberleutnant, I guess, a first lieutenant, could have been a captain. And he was ready to cross over where the road that we were on. We were going the opposite direction, crisscrossing in other words. Well, there's an MP out there. He had 3 stripes on. He's a buck sergeant, and they used to direct traffic. So when this German vehicle came up to cross, I thought, let's see what's going to happen here. Now, he has the right of way, I think, as far as you just look at it, who's gets there first. And this sergeant just put his hand up like that. He says, "Stop." Now, behind that, to me, I was almost in a mixture of tears and elation. That was the first time I said, "We've arrived." That guy, he was furious. I mean, you know, you could tell. And we just, about as far as from here to you, he's not very far away, this guy. And so he couldn't say a word. I know what he's trying to say. And the sergeant just put his hand out. "You guys, come on." We drove on across. There's no officer in the Jeep that I was in. We just went on. And I thought, dear God, we're there. As far as I could see, Germans had surrendered, and we went on from there. Let me jump over to the time I got a pass. This will be important. I think you will say it'll be the first one you hear, maybe. A lot of the guys would want to go home as soon as possible, back to the United States, that is. And not
This
everybody
is the war is over.
War is
You're,
over.
you're in occupation now.
That's right, sure am. And they moved us on back for a day or two. I was still in Austria. There some nearby places they couldn't move them all at one time, just one day's time. All of us, thousands were there, our troops and theirs. So we got to swim the first time in a nice lake because that was it. The other guys were busy, MPs were busy, and the guys were guarding these fellas. But anyhow, I applied for the pass only because some of the guys had been over 2.5 years. And see, I was over 18 months, 20 months, and this 3 years of service. That's what that means, and that's the presidential citation there, and so on. And plus the 4 battle stars that I was in 4 areas where there was combat in an area that's considered to be a combat zone. Anyhow, I was able to get the 3-day pass, to Paris because they said to heck with that. He didn't quite say it like that. He said it a little stronger than that with the Parisians. I want to go. I'll wait and go home. So I was able to go because I'd heard it on radio and so on that Glenn Miller was playing in Paris in a certain hotel there. I thought, well, I'll go to that. That would be because I liked to dance when I was in high school and so on, ballroom dance. But when I got there, I realized that he, maybe on the radio before that he was lost at sea. He was a captain in the Air Force, Air Corps it was, and I never knew just what happened. So that was disappointing. However, I was able to stay at that hotel, and there's a kind of a luxury hotel right in the center of Paris. And they also had some people that kind of served us to dance and so on with that. I'm trying to say special service people that agreed to help us out and show us. They were glad we're here, and so I'm trying to think of another word, but anyhow, that's what it was. So there's some French girls there to dance with the music they did have, and so I enjoyed that very much. And of course, she asked me, well, what's my name? And I said, Robert. She says, oh, Robert. And I liked that. I thought that sounded pretty good. And it sound, And so I said, well, what's your name? And she said, well, what you called Jacqueline was Jacqueline. I said, oh, I like that. So it was Jacqueline, and she was a tall lady as we talked. This to me is very significant way it goes forward here. She was a worker in the underground of the FFE. That's French. It's actually FFI. It's pronounced FFE. She was risking her life all this time for months in the underground of Paris in France. And I like that. Now, where are you from? And I said, Atlanta, Georgia. Oh, Georgia! Gone with the wind. Oh, it's voila, ooh la la. So she wanted to let me dance more than normal, I guess, after that, because really, and some guys here in this area are going to be happy to know that. I said, well, then you know about Gone with the Wind? She said, oh, yes. And I asked her what a lot of people, I don't think, know why it's been put in 56 languages and 15 or 20 million copies sold, whatever it is, not that exact figure. And I said, well, why was it so attractive? I met a German Fräulein that had read it. She had left in the Russian front with her father, who was a professional person, and she had read the book and knew all about it. And she said, well, it gave us encouragement to go forward. But Scarlett said, tomorrow and tomorrow, and I will persist. I will bring Tara back, and regardless of Rhett Butler and the rest of them. And so she told me that, and I realized then that that's why they liked it so well. So I said, well, could we talk further afterwards? Could I walk you home? I said, go home, later on. And she said, no, the rules won't let us do that. And she thought about it. I think Libby said, what we can do, if you'll be outside at like 11:30 at night, of course, it might even be midnight, I don't know which it was. I didn't exactly care. And so said, I'll meet you there and we can walk home. So we did that, and we crossed several bridges, across the Seine River there, beautiful night, and we, well, instead of holding hands, we were singing, and she was singing, and that's not their language, but anyhow, that's the way it sounded, and we were enjoying this, I was, and she was too, thoroughly, and we had our hands around one another's waist as we walked along and singing like that, and oh my goodness. And this part, she put my hand in her chest, and up further than it would be chest under her breast. Now I said I was going to put this on here. I prayed about this, and so my point is, the person that I am, I froze at that. I really did. What do I do now? Now she, evidently we had something in common to talk about, and that was fine. I like that. But for a while, for another half a mile, my hand was not where I put it at all, and I want to make that clear. My wife knows this too today. So we walked on, and I said, well, walked on to her place, and how am I going to get back home? You know, and I thought about it. I don't care. This is a great night, and I just, as the 3-day pass, had 2 more days. Said, well, can I see you tomorrow? Can we get together? And she said, yes. See, we. And so we met and to go out to a cafe somewhere and eat, restaurant, and they had a floor show, type of thing in front of us, a little ways, not too far off, and for where we're eating, inside, of course. And I began to look sort of fidgety, and she was looking at me and started grinning. And you might could guess, or maybe you couldn't. Robert, you're embarrassed. I said, yes, I am. Because those actors, they weren't wearing very much, if not anything, the ladies, before we finished, we were putting on the floor show. She knew that was going to be there, and I didn't. Anyhow, so I said, well, when we finish eating then, let's leave. And so we did. That's the way it was. We walked some more and talked some more, and what she was doing, and some of her adventures and so on, and she went through to speak out and put out this paper and so on. Well, that was the end of Saturday, and I said, well, could I see you tomorrow then, Sunday? That's my last day here. Could we get together? That night, though, it's still Saturday night, and we walked up as far, and I said, well, where do you live, actually? She said, these apartments up here on the 2nd floor. I said, well, can I walk you up to home? She said, oh, no. She said, my parents don't like GIs at all. She said that they believe that all GIs, and she said, I feel about the same way. They're after whiskey, drink, and sex. And she said, you're the first one that I've talked with that didn't have that in mind at all. I said, thank you. That's right. So I couldn't walk up. The other part was, I said, well, could I go to church with you tomorrow? I knew she was Catholic. I said, I'm Protestant. And she said, oh, no. And I thought, well, now, why is that? Looks like that would work out all right. I said, no. If we went together to one of my services, I'd be thinking of you, and I'm not supposed to do that. I said, well, that's a new a rejoinder I hadn't heard before. I said, all right. So I think we did in the afternoon. We chatted a little bit later Sunday afternoon, but not at our church. And so that we parted with that. Later on, I've heard we wrote several times back when we got in the States. I'm going back after the war's over a little bit. I'm going to come back to that. But she was a smart lady, very much so. And she said, I'm writing from the Police de Justice. This would be our Supreme Court in our country. I'm working on my doctorate. I was in college at the time too, my wife and I both here. And she said, they're having the hearing of Marshal Pétain. And if anybody knows the history, they know that he was a hero of World War I, highly thought of. Excuse me. At that time, he was about 72, 73, and it appears that he capitulated to the Germans in the sense that he didn't want to see, he says, any more bad things happen to France. So in Vichy, just a small little town, almost nothing, which became the headquarters for a year approximately, and so he was convicted of not espionage, but being a traitor, and I think it's unfortunate. But anyhow, she had to listen in on that and get the points of it, and she wrote me about that. It was very interesting. I still have the letters from that. And later on, she married. She turned out to be a good skier, and one of the key points where the Winter Games were held, she was in part of that, and she married a fellow on the coast that had shipping concern. Well, that's the last time we heard that. But anyhow, that was very interesting to me. Later on in Germany, though, I'm switching back to that. We still had things that were still going on. The war, well, I'm going back. Okay, the war's not over. We're back again. Our troops were about to cross the Rhine. We were near Salzburg. And how much time do I have?
You're fine. Don't worry.
All right.
Don't worry about it.
And at that time, I was handling communications in the in the headquarters there, and I'm going to back up still a little bit further, even where we're in another part of Germany, not in Salzburg. And I received a call coming through. I was on duty that night while everybody else had gone to bed, and the officer in command was in the building, of course. I always keep one there, and I was an enlisted man still. And so I was there to answer any calls, and I received a call, which I'm going to make this a little more meaningful than it might be otherwise. That the call had come through from Paris. I could tell the way it was saying, and before that from London, before that from the Pentagon, and before that from a little town in South Georgia. And they told us our Commander-in-Chief, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, died just a couple of hours ago. So that made that on April the 14th, one day different from the time I went into service. But anyhow, so I was to share that news. I woke up the duty officer and told him I hadn't thought about that at all. So the next day, as I remember, maybe the second day after that, we had a memorial service there nearby in a German church, which was unique to me in that it started out, goodness, 400 or 500 years ago, I'm sure. Many of those churches were that old, and it was Catholic, which most of that area would have been. Later on, after the Protestant Reformation and so on, they had Protestants. So what was one long building lengthwise, they added on to both sides of it, so that the Protestant arm had this part, and the Catholics met and still had that. So that's where we had the service. I always will remember that. Back to the Rhine crossing. Of course, that was a hard thing to be done. Naturally, it'll be casualties. A lot of strategy to be involved by General Dahlquist, who's with Commander, Major General of our division, 15,000 men to start out with. We lose a lot of them over time. So I was having communications that night, mostly with the switchboard. I was back to that again, and I knew some of the colonels by that time. I mean, I was supposed to. That they could depend on me, and I could do what was necessary to get the communications through. So I worked there for a number of hours that evening, on into the late night, just in the building, just myself there, and because I was handling communication, telephone, not some of the other things. And I got a call, I answered it, and on telephone, and this is Captain so-and-so, and General Stack, the Assistant Division Commander, Brigadier General, said he's very impressed with your outstanding work this evening. It was tough things that were going on. A lot of guys were getting killed and so on, and I was just making the connections to the right places real quickly over the phone lines. And he said, he's asked me, I'm his aide, this is Captain, and I'm going to bring you around a little reward that the General wants me to present to you. And I said, well, I'm just doing my job, but I appreciate the thoughtfulness. And I hung up, and I knew right away I had a problem. And maybe no one else today would ever think of that. There's only two things that they, in a way of saying, I've said before, you reward a person other than Congressional Medal of Honor, but lacking that and some stars, special silver stars, it's either liquor or it's sex. Not supposed to, but that's what it comes down to. Fellas that worked hard and been getting shot at and so on, where they say, well, if I can have this will help me get through this or get over this. And I knew neither one of those applied to me, of course, to be useful at all. And I knew it was going to be liquor, going to be Four Roses or something. They had that stuff. They say it in the annals and out there, always have it on the front lines and out on armies. So I thought, what am I going to do? I'm a guy with a couple of stripes, and there's a captain going to come by, but he's an officer. Am I just going to say no thanks, or am I going to just take it and not have to say that word go back to the general that he refused this guy? What? But I prayed over it about as deeply as I had up till that time. And I said, Father, I'm supposed to be a Christian. I say one thing when I was in church, when I was in Atlanta, Georgia, very active as a person, active here in church work. And if I claim to be a Christian, I've got to let it be known that I happen not to be. I'm one of those who just does not drink, those that do. And I must refuse that to the captain and let him say what he wishes. So I heard a squeaking, and the Jeep makes a little sound when it puts the brakes on those cobblestone streets, and Oh Lord, I got 3 minutes before he walks in. And he comes in and didn't look too joyous. He looked a little bit hard pressed. And he said, Corporal Porter, Sergeant Porter, I've got some bad news to tell you. And I said, oh, sir. I saluted and he said, we rounded that corner back here just up the street, and these German roads narrow. He said, that bottle fell off and broke. And all I could do but to laugh. And I had no sense not to, you know. But I said, oh, sir, thank you so much. He said, but listen, I'll get some more tomorrow and I'll bring this over. I said, no, sir. Wow, I didn't laugh. I had more sense to do that, but I wanted to. After he left, I did, you know. But the Lord answered that. And to this day, this is one of the testimonies, one of them, which some people would say simple. But you see, I was concerned of whether I should say that to be chicken, and I'm not that kind. My later life has proved that I'm not. So I said, sir, I appreciate that. I happen not to be a drinker of Bible at all. And I said, you just tell the gentleman, I appreciate it, but you don't need to replace that. So he says, all right. And he walked out. So that was kind of the end of that. And by the way, the church that I belonged to back there, this is unusual, but this is a particular church that on April the 13th, got that wrong. I want to get the date. That's kind of important. July the 4th, excuse me. This is a Methodist church in Atlanta, Northeast, where I belong to. And this, I was not here at that time, but you know, out of a church of about maybe 12 or 1,400 members, these are the guys that have been in service by name. And there is 275, or a few more than that, they're all in the service at that time. That's a pretty high percentage. That's about 10, 11, or 12% there. And following that, the ones that were killed. And they paid a high honor at that, because I wasn't here. My mother kept this. And there's the ones that we lost, 11 who didn't come back. So I always, remember this very highly. In Germany later on, went into this belt buckle here has a swastika. And there's one more thing I think it bears out how we differ in our country from what the Germans stood for. That's the swastika on their buckles, and also in German, obviously, is God be with us. And what a change of outlook that they have has followed this. That people were sold on the fact that I guess that Christ was with them, or God was with them, and of course their purposes in all of this war was not the same as ours. So I kept that just as a reminder. Then I switched to the fact that I'd like to bring home some souvenirs of these 3 countries, and so we able to do this. We get permission, but I was able to get a French rifle. No longer would they be used now after the war. And then a French carbine, Italian carbine, and a German rifle. So to get these home, though, I had to find a way you couldn't just wrap paper around them, you know. And I found where the Germans had left arms stacks several places around where after the war they still hadn't been removed yet. And so I determined that I would unload a metal carrying box, a shipping box that was about this long, enough to contain the famous 88. Guys in the service would know that. It clamped over on one end. It was waterproof, all it had to be, because these were live shells, and I had to decide, is this worth my unloading that thing and get blown to pieces or not? I decided that it wouldn't go off my, so I slipped out each 3 of those with the shell pulled out from the side, anyhow, and then use those cases to send home back to Atlanta. And the mailman would come up to where mother was and ring the doorbell and said, well, I don't know what this is. It looked like your son has sent something home again. And after 3 of them came, she thought, Robert, she said, write me, you know, what is this? I said, well, I'll just have to tell you, they're arms. I mean, there's rifles from several countries, and I'll tell you more about it when I got there. So all that time, they were just stood off in the corner. They're about the size of a golf bag, about that size, so I was able to do that. So next, to let you know that I wanted to follow up on some of the awful things that happened with extermination camps in Dachau. Was not too far at that time from where we were. Well, to get around, I still had to catch a ride. They didn't provide that for me, give me a free Jeep or anything, so I would do like this. and I was determined. So I went to a number of cities, half a dozen at least, but Dachau was one of them. And most of you probably know about this, but just to say very briefly, it was one of the first ones. It was near München, maybe 10 or 15 miles away, and supposedly the Germans never knew about this. They said that that is everyday civilians, that they didn't, and perhaps they didn't. But they would take them to those captives that were there. Many of them were Jews, some of them were from other countries, but majority were Jews. And they would load them up in trucks and take them over to this building, concrete block type of building. And the word on the outside said Bad, B-A-D, that's the word for bath, and they assumed that they were going to take a shower, and looking forward to that, of course. Didn't have any of that before. So they walked in there, they disrobed entirely, and as they walked in, a door closed behind them, and gas jets put out cyanide, and they would have killed in a matter of 2, 3, 4 minutes. They thought they were standing under a little receptacle that was put out water, a spray of water for a shower, like you look just that way. I went through all this. Had a guy who was a Polish fellow that was able to escape being put to death. So I saw all that. I made some pictures around about it. I don't have those with me, but I figured someday somebody would say that didn't happen. So I went to where the ovens were in an adjoining room, and they'd slide a body in there and just, of course, cremate them. And then they sold what was left of the bones, and they would tell, actually it was powder at that time, and some of the families thought that and said, this is your husband's or your kindred, and it wasn't at all. So they did all those dastardly things, really. And to make it known that I really knew, one of the rooms where they had stacked the bodies up, I could tell all the way up, maybe 7 or 8 feet up the wall, there were footprints from bodies that were pushed against the wall, and the dirty, I could tell, in case someone said it. Today, some professors around the country saying that didn't happen. Okay, they can't say to me that it didn't happen because, among other things, if they'd removed the bodies were gone, all this after the war was over with, but I had those footprints all the way, the top 3 or 4 of them, barefooted. If you had dust and was dirty, you would have a footprint. So I took that. One more thing, it made it even worse than that. There was an area there, maybe 6 or 8 feet square, barbed wire around it, just a chicken wire type of thing, that they would keep dogs, German police dogs, sort of. And so they would take certain Germans, I guess ones, I don't know whether they hated the most or whatever, and they wouldn't feed the dogs for 2 or 3 days, or maybe more. Oh, they knew they were still alive, but they were hungry. But the fellow took me through this and showed me, and they would put 1 or maybe 2 Jewish prisoners in there until they were just destroyed by those animals. And I could look at the ground beneath that spot right in the, pretty much in the middle, it was just soaked red from blood. Obviously that was it. So that was horrific. But I wanted to know that took place. Well, shortly after that, I'll say I went on to get the discharge, and we went on to Marseille to board a boat, ships there to come back. And this was getting into December of 45. Still, what am I, 44, excuse me, 44. And
no, 45.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. And we get to take a shower. This is the 3rd shower in 20 months that I can remember taking. And I have one of my daughter-in-law said one time, she's always taking a shower, today I'm talking about it, and she said, can't imagine anybody not taking a shower every day. And I said, are you kidding? I went to, except for going to the past, and the hotel and so on. I said, that was the 3rd time. He said, it must have been awful. I didn't notice it that much. But anyhow, we were standing there to take a shower in the birthday suit, and it was cold. This was in Marseille, and it was December, and I could see the steam coming up off our bodies, and the water wasn't warm either, but anyhow, that was our last shower. Well, I got on board ship. It took us 11 days to get back. We went back to Hampton Roads, Virginia, down that area. Then I went to Fort Jackson in Augusta, and I want to get home in a hurry, and I said, I want to charter a plane. Now, a little money that I had, I could have had $50 on me, or $60, I don't know, and I was mustering out money. So I gave this fellow whatever it was to get on board a little Cessna Piper, I guess it was, club plane, and he said, we can't carry much more of that duffel bag you got, so we just did load up, so it flew into Atlanta, and I was back home. And then I go to the phone the next night, and I call a lady, that girl that went to Girls High here and so forth, and how about seeing you? I won't call the name, that wouldn't be good. And I said, like, just got back yesterday, and I said, can we have a date this next weekend? Oh, no, Robert. She didn't say Robert, she said, Robert, I'll have to tell you, so and so and I have got an understanding, and I'm not dating anybody else. And I said, I knew it. I got here too late. Well, I was friends with both of them, so I guess as I wind this up, I want to say the experiences I had. There were some good, some bad. I think I was able to stay out of the temptations of giving in to them. I learned a lot about Germany, things I could appreciate. Most of the cities had weapons, what they call weapons, and this is a further example. You might want to zoom in on this. These we would call coat of arms, the French would, and we would call them logos. But every city, I would think, has a logo telling something about it. For example, Paris, what would you think they'd have on their little weapon? These are sterling silver. I didn't have the places I could go to that didn't have these on hand. The government's going to get me for this. They said, I'll have to have some silver. So I asked my mother to send me some dimes from Atlanta. The ounce was mostly silver at that time. So they made up some of these. Well, Paris would have a picture of a ship because on both sides is water. And 1,000 years ago, it was Paris, P-A-R-I-I. And that's in the middle, they were a tribe. So that was it. Stuttgart, what do you think Stuttgart has on it? It has a horse on it. Why? Stud is horse from us. And garden means the same thing as Kentucky. It was a horse farm way back, hundreds of years ago. Some of the finest cars are made there today. So each one of these had its special significance. Over here, Oberammergau. That's where every 10 years, during the bubonic plague, the people in this little town, the southern part of Germany, said, if you will not let them hit us, we will have a passion play put on with the crucifixion of Christ and all that stands for. Germany now, remember. During the war, they would not make any ammunition, not produce any ammunition or anything of that kind. Or the most how they got by with it. But a small place, maybe 8,000 or 10,000 people, beautiful area. So they said, we'll make crutches, but that's all we'll make. They had people there that could carve things. And I bought a little something that they carved. I didn't have the money for it. I don't know, $10 or $12 maybe. And he said, that's all right, go ahead and take it. I'll send it to you. And they sent that to me back to this country, and I paid for them later. So those are some of the very fine things. And I want to say that I hope that 10 days later, I was in college. My wife and I met at the Atlanta Division of the University of Georgia. We were married in 1949. We went on to the University of Georgia, graduated together, and I became a key runner, road runner in Atlanta for 20 years, and I always and will always now wear this old cap, which has been around a long time, and I'm proud to wear it because it's been through. I was one of the better runners of Atlanta Track Club at that time. And
what was your profession?
I went with the American Red Cross for a number of years, and worked with. I went back to these same places and I saw a lot of places. And learn to appreciate the Edelweiss, which is Edelweiss, and you remember the song. And so I learned to appreciate that. And
how many children did you have?
We still have two children,
two.
And 4 grandchildren, and
Okay.
1 great granddaughter. And that couple, right in the Air Force, both of them are in the Air Force now. One of them was in England working out with that top secret unit that picks up all that stuff from around about, and the other one is in Aviano in Italy. And they are working on the F-26s, so they're right there. So I just say today I'm grateful. I had a strong belief before I went into the service, and it stood me well. And I hope some of this will show that to expect what Sherman said. He came into Atlanta before he got here. War is hell, and it is, but it does tend to bring out the best and the worst in all of us. Be prepared in your heart that you'll be at your best when you serve our country again. And be proud of it as I was.
Robert,
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure interviewing with you. We really appreciate your time.
Let me say I appreciate the Atlanta History Club, History Group, which is doing this very much, and they're doing a wonderful thing. And I hope this will help some who are getting history resumes up and who study this.